Hi, everybody. Hi, friends of the management of reality. This is the inaugural podcast of our new weekly Bible podcast. So, what are we going to be doing here? Well, as many of you know, I am publishing a series of articles which will eventually be put together as a book that cover the topic of the great historical fight in Western Asia that has been going on for 4,300 years, that I call the struggle between Semitism and anti Semitism. And this for us is a very important model because we this struggle between Semitism and anti Semitism has been ordering political life in Western Asia, which includes Europe and the Mediterranean, during all this time. And it also explains what is happening to us right now and why Western civilization is in danger. And to speak of the Bible without invoking this larger framework would be a disservice to everybody who's listening to us at the management of reality, because the Jewish people and the Jewish religion are a product of this older movement that I call Semitism. They are the most sophisticated and exquisite product of Babylonian Semitism, and it is the Jewish movement that brought all of the values, which are ethical values of justice, compassion, um, brotherhood, freedom, and so forth, to the West. Right, all of those ethical values of Babylonian Semitism were brought to the West by the Jews, as if you will, as the pinnacle and vehicle of Babylonian Semitism. So eventually, Babylonian Semitism disappeared because they were defeated first by the Greco-Macedonian anti-Semites, and then by the Muslim anti-Semites, right? And eventually, in Mesopotamia, that civilization disappeared. But the most important product of that civilization, the Jews, they came to the West and they transformed the Greco-Roman anti-Semites into Judeo-Christian Westerners who eventually produced modern democracy, right? So this is a very important story. And it means that the great protagonist of this Western story, of our story, is, of course, the Hebrew Bible, right? That's the vehicle, the Hebrew Bible, and the people organized around the Hebrew Bible, are the vehicle, the social and intellectual vehicle that brought these ideas to the West, right? So this is a central thing to study if we want to understand our own civilization and if we want to understand our own political predicament, and also how we Westerners might emancipate ourselves from the forces that oppress us and push forward for a new great victory for Semitism, and therefore for liberty, for justice, for compassion, for righteousness, as is usually translated from the Hebrew tzedek to modern European languages, right? Righteousness, which really means ethics. Okay, so it's very important to talk about the Bible, to understand the Bible better, and that's what we're going to be doing in this podcast. And we're going to be making those connections to the larger model that we have in management of reality, and to this struggle between Semitism and anti-Semitism. Okay, just to give people a very short anchor to everything that I'm saying, I'm going to share my screen for 1 second. And I'm going to show you where you can see this. So we go to the website here. So if you go to the archive and you type Semitism, right, on Management of Reality Substack, this is the first article. This is the article that begins the series on Semitism and anti-Semitism. And very, very briefly, because this is our introductory podcast, Let me lay out the basic claim of the model. So what this says is that we need to use the term anti-Semitism in a broader sense so that it is more theoretically useful. Okay?
Okay.
It is more theoretically useful if we recognize that anti-Semitism is not simply hatred of Jews. It is much more than that. Because there's a very strong, in fact, perfect correlation over 4,300 years where we see that, forgive me, 2,500 years, where we see that every time there is a ruling elite attacking the Jews, those same anti-Semites, those same people who want to destroy the Jews, they're also enslaving everybody else. Okay? Everybody becomes a slave when the anti-Semites are in power. So every time we see great mass killings, expulsions, forced conversions, enslavement, and so forth of Jews, every time we see these great anti-Jewish persecutions, at the same time, those responsible for the persecutions are enslaving all of the non-Jews. Okay? So today it's the jihadis who have a policy of enslaving all the infidels when they don't kill them. Before that, it was the Nazis who killed the Jews in Europe, but also enslaved all the Europeans whom they didn't kill, because they killed many, right? All of the Europeans they didn't kill, they were all enslaved. Then you have the Russian imperialists, the Catholic inquisitors, and the Greco-Roman ruling elites in the ancient classical world. And all of them were making slaves of everybody at the same time that they were organizing great mass killings of Jews. It's a perfect correlation. Okay. So anti-Semitism is not simply hatred of Jews. It's a political system. Anti-Semitism is a political system. It's totalitarianism. It's slavery. It's authoritarianism. Okay. And the anti-Semites are always producing these kinds of political systems. Okay, systems that enslave everybody and make it impossible to think, impossible to create freely, impossible to profit from your effort and rise and become an influential person on your own merits and so forth. Totalitarian systems abolish all of that because they abolish freedom and they turn everybody into a slave. So that's anti-Semitism in the broader sense, right? And it means that if the fundamental nature of anti-Semitism is this totalitarian tendency or goal, then the hatred of Jews must be instrumental. I mean, you can have totalitarianism without Jews, right? Without destroying any. I mean, even before the Jews existed, in other words, we can find this movement pushing for totalitarianism, and also even before the Jews existed, we can find the other side, the people who are fighting for the light, who are fighting for ethics, for liberty, for justice, and so forth, right? And guess what? The people who were fighting the good fight before there were any Jews were Semites, like the Jews. Okay, so there's a Semitic civilization that goes all the way back to the very start of history in Sumeria, and the structure of that society in Sumer, forgive me, in English it's Sumer. The structure of that society was the Sumerians on top and the Semites at the bottom. The Semites were the slaves, and there was a revolution. There was a revolution 4,300 years ago, led by Sargon of Akkad. And what this guy Sargon did is he led the Semites against the Sumerian ruling class and won. And in the aftermath of that, he created a new society. He in fact, he conquered a very big piece of land. This is the first empire. And in that huge chunk of land that he conquered, he created a new kind of society where Sumerians and Semites were all equal now. and where because he didn't oppress the Sumerians, he didn't do that. He created a brotherhood, and this new political culture stabilized the idea that the role of the king is to make legal reforms to protect everybody. Okay, so even the most vulnerable categories of people ended up protected by the law in these southern Mesopotamian societies. So the orphans, widows, the poor, slaves, they were all protected by law. And of course, these are societies that, well, if you're already approving laws to protect the rights of slaves, pretty soon you're going to be abolishing slavery. Obviously, that's the direction that you're going in, right? And of course, that is what happened in ancient Babylonia. And you can see this development in particular in the Jewish law, because the Jewish law is a movement designed to abolish slavery. Not coincidentally, the origin of Jewish law is the story of a slave revolt, right? The slave revolt organized by Moses with the Israelites in Egypt, right? And so the law of the liberated slaves, the law of Moses, the Jewish law, is performing the last stage of the evolution of Babylonian Semitism, right? It's going all the way to the logical end of this trend to produce a grassroots movement, right? Because before the Jews, it was a top-down phenomenon. It was the kings making themselves responsible for making legal reforms and protecting ordinary people. But once the Jewish movement emerges, now you're talking about a grassroots movement that doesn't need kings, that can stabilize the fight for freedom without kings, okay? And therefore is resistant to short-term political swings, okay? And I mean, the demonstration that the Jewish movement is well designed is that 2,500 years later, which is how long I think it's been around. I won't get into that right now, but if you accept the chronology of the Torah, then you're talking about of the Hebrew Bible, then you're talking about 3,500 years. If you accept my chronology, we're talking about 2,500 years. It's a very long time. Either way, and the peoples that were contemporaneous with the ancient Jews all that time ago no longer exist, and the Jews are still here, right? So obviously this is a very well-designed movement, and the design comes out of the Torah. And so what we're going to be looking at with a view to making all these historical and political connections as best we can is we're going to be doing each week's parasha, and we're going to be commenting on it and develop some thoughts about it. And sometimes we will be commenting what famous rabbis have said about it. Not always. And then we will also be inviting rabbis to discuss these passages and their philosophical and legal ramifications.
So what's the parasha of this week, Francisco?
So the parasha of this week, let's get into it. So that is Devarim, or Deuteronomy, chapter 3, verse 23, all the way to chapter 7, verse 11. Okay? It's a long passage. And
the name is Vaetjanan.
Yeah, you say it. The name is?
Vaetjanan.
Tell him what it means.
Vaetjanan, it means like to ask God to, like a súplica. I don't know how to say it in English.
To beseech, right? The verb is to beseech. To beseech the Lord, or beseech the Jewish people. So here, quickly summarized, what's going on is that Moses beseeches the Lord. He pleads with the Lord to let him enter the promised land. Okay, so the Israelites have already conquered the lands that are east of the Jordan, and now they're getting ready. This is the very end of the Torah. This Devarim, or Deuteronomy, is the fifth book of the 5 books of Moses. And so the story of Moses and the people of Israel is coming to an end, and the people of Israel are getting ready to cross the River Jordan and enter the promised land. So Moses is pleading with the Lord, hey, please let me in. I want to enter the promised land with the people of Israel. And the Lord denies the request. Now, the text explains that the Lord denies the request because he's mad at Moses. But not only at Moses. He is mad at Moses and at the Israelites. But he can't very well punish all of the Israelites, and forbid entry of the entire people to the promised land, because if he does that, then the whole experiment of the Jewish people in history, it's over, right? So he has to let the people into the promised land. He can't punish all of the Jewish people, so he punishes Moses. And so the text says that Moses is punished on account of his sin, but also on account of the sin of the Israelites. And the reference that the text makes is to Meribah and Massa. So they're talking about there's 2 incidents when the Israelites are wandering the desert with Moses after they escape slavery in Egypt, right? So for those of you who don't remember a lot of your Bible, the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, and Moses, with the help of God, organizes the escape of the slaves into the Sinai desert. There's all these miracles and the parting of the Red Sea. You probably remember those scenes. And then once they're on the other side of the Red Sea, there is this dramatic scene with the column of smoke and fire and the voice of God speaking to the Israelite peoples, to the Israelites. And they make this pact to be faithful to each other, right? The Lord and the Israelites. But they're wandering through the desert, and the Israelites develop doubts about the Lord. So even after all the miracles, after the parting of the Red Sea, after they witnessed the column of smoke and fire and the voice of the Lord speaking to them, even after all these miracles, they find themselves in the desert and there's nothing to drink. So in these 2 episodes, the issue is there's nothing to drink. And they start to think to themselves, well, it seems like the Lord and Moses brought us out to the desert to kill us. I mean, what is this about? What what was the point of all this? So yeah, we were slaves in Egypt, but at least we were getting fed, and now we're out here in the desert and there's nothing to drink, and clearly we're all gonna die. So they get very upset with Moses, and Moses actually fears for his life, and he asks the Lord, what am I gonna do? And in the first episode, the Lord says, well, go strike the rock and
talk to the rock, right?
No, that's in the second one.
Okay.
That's the second event.
Okay.
So in the first one, go strike the rock. So he goes strike the rock, and water comes and people drink. But then there's a second episode where they get scared again that there's nothing to drink.
Hmm.
That's when the Lord says, "Go speak to the rock." And Moses, instead of speaking to the rock, because he's very upset with the Israelites, he scolds them, and he strikes the rock,
Hmm.
and and he says, and he talks to the Israelites, sort of implying that he's the one who brings the water, right? So he doesn't give credit to the Lord, uh, and he disrespects the literal order that he got, which was, you should speak to the rock, not strike it. Uh,
Hmm.
so so this profoundly offends the Lord, uh, and he is offended in two ways. So one of the things that offends the Lord is clearly that the Israelites have no faith in him, right? Like, why are they getting so worried? I've already brought them out of Egypt. I did all of these incredible miracles. I parted the Red Sea. That was the biggest one, but there were 10 plagues before that, and they were all spectacular. And then I parted the Red Sea. Then I appeared in a column of smoke. Then I gave them the best laws, that have ever existed. Uh, and already once, when there was no water, I gave them water from the rock. And again, I have to hear these complaints. Again, they are doubting that I am going to protect them. This is what offends him. It seems from the text
Hmm.
that they could possibly still uh, doubt that God is on their side, right? Why are they getting afraid again? And in the case of Moses, he is upset that uh, it seems right. He is because the text is not super explicit, but from context, you want to infer that the exact order that God gave was not followed, right? So he's worried about Moses not being a serious servant of the Lord and doing exactly as the Lord says. So that's one thing. And the other thing that seems to bother him is that Moses is acting in anger when God wanted a softer softer approach to the Israelites, at
Hmm.
least at this particular juncture, right? So he wanted Moses to speak to the rock, and he didn't command Moses to scold the Israelites, right? So it seems that God wanted to appear in this particular instance as sort of compassionate and merciful, um, but Moses arrogates to himself the role of the wrathful God, right? He without any instruction to do so, he takes on this role of the scolder, when God didn't want to do that. So that
Hmm.
seems to be what offends God. So all of this becomes the reason for the Lord to forbid Moses entering the promised land. Okay, it's the sin of the people, the double sin of the people on the one hand, and also Moses disobeyed, right?
Yes.
And because he can't enter the promised land, what Moses does is he starts to have a kind of a farewell exchange with the Israelites. So he says, "Look, I'm not going to go with you. You're going to go on your own. So I wanna reinforce some things for you, right?" And he starts telling them things that he's already told them, actually many times, right? Um, and this is something I want to discuss because the repetition here carries a lot of weight. One thing that is important to know about the ancient world is that paper was expensive. Paper was expensive. Um,
Okay.
any kind of material to write on was expensive. Today,
Hmm.
it's very cheap. It's mass produced. It's industrially mass produced. It's incredibly cheap. We are always writing on paper. There's paper everywhere. But making books in the ancient world, that was a very costly enterprise. And making copies was a very costly enterprise, right? Everything had to be done by hand. So when people wrote texts in the ancient world, they had a very strong pressure to write with economy. There was a very strong pressure to say as much as you could with the fewest words, because you just couldn't be wasting paper. Okay? You just couldn't be wasting paper. So when you find in ancient texts that something is repeated over and over and over and over again,
it's very important.
Yes, you need to understand that the author is screaming. The author is screaming because paper is very, very expensive. So if you're saying the same thing over and over and over again in an ancient text, you're doing that. You're doing that because it's the only way to convey, other than from the structure of the narrative and some adjectives that you might use, right? But adjectives can get old if you overuse them. So the repetition, when people are always trying to be economical, is really dramatic. I mean, it really, if you're an ancient reader, this really hits you, right? Oh my God, he said it 10 times? 10 times? How much paper is that? Oh my God, it must be really important because the cost is very high. You see? And this goes directly into something that is a big topic in game theory. In game theory, there's a whole section of game theory called costly signaling theory. What costly signaling theory says is that the more costly a message is to emit, to send, right? The more it costs you to produce a signal, the more you can trust that the signal is honest, because it means that it is very difficult to fake the signal, precisely because it is costly. You have to pay a lot to produce the signal, which means that you can believe that whoever is emitting the signal, one really wants to emit it and can emit it. That's very important right away, right? So if in the ancient world an author is paying the price because it's costly of redundancy, of saying the same thing over and over and over again, you know that they really, really, really care about what they're saying because it's costing them to say it. Okay?
But Francisco, you didn't explain us what did they say or repeat.
So I'm going to this.
Okay.
So what Moses does is he repeats the entire 10 Commandments. Why do you need to do that? You already had the 10 Commandments, right? The entire narrative setting for the 10 Commandments was already terribly dramatic, right? I mean, in narrative terms, oh my God, there's a big column of smoke and fire on top of Mount Sinai. I mean, what the hell is that? That's as dramatic as it can get. It's terrifying. And Moses goes all the way up to the summit. The leader of the people goes all the way up to the summit where the presence of God is touching the top of the mountain, right? And at the summit of the mountain, in direct contact with God, Moses receives the 10 Commandments. Well, that's already completely dramatic. And they're already written on the page. You can just flip back. You can flip back to the page and read the 10 Commandments. Why would you have to say it again?
I can think of two arguments here, Francisco, if you let me add something. Well, the first one is what you said. It's very important, so we need to be repeated in order to not to forget it. That's the first one. And the second one is that they're gonna be separate from Moshe, right? Because they're going into Israel, they're going like that nearby, and Moshe and Moses is not going with them. So like Moses is like the connection, right, with the divine and the territory, like the world, the mundane, right?
He's the prophet. Yep.
He's the prophet. So if he's gone, he's separated from the group. Like it's the last words. It's like the last message that he wants to give the right.
It's his last chance.
His last chance. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. So precisely because it's his last chance, he repeats the things that are very important. Right? So now repeats the 10 commandments, but he repeats a bunch of other things too. Right? And he tells them, so I want to go over some of these. So he says, one of the things he says that I think I'm going to share my screen so that people can read with me. So notice he says, your eyes have seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor for all the men who followed and participated in the worship of Baal of Peor. The Lord your God destroyed them from among you. But you who held tightly to the Lord your God are alive today, every one of you. Okay? So what is he doing here? Notice this is...
Francisco, it was perfect before. Don't zoom in.
No. Okay. Like that?
Yeah, perfect. That's right. That's perfect.
Okay, good. So notice this is establishing a kind of a contractual relationship, right? So what is this business at Baal Peor? Well, it's worshiping other gods, right? It's idolatry. It's a violation of the first commandment. So if you do that, if you abandon the Lord for other gods, then he'll destroy you. If you, however, hold tightly to the Lord, right, then you'll be okay. Those of you who held tightly to the Lord are alive today, every one of you. Okay? So this has consequences. If you abandon me, death. If you stick to me, you'll live.
Wow.
Now, what does it mean to abandon the Lord? See, this is the thing that needs to be interpreted. It is not simply so. What does it mean? First of all, what does it mean to worship the Lord? He makes this very clear throughout the book, right? Throughout the 5 books of Moses, the Lord makes very clear that you worship the Lord by following his law. Okay? That's how you worship the Lord. Of course, the first commandment is you shall have no other gods. But that commandment, the commandment against idolatry, has consequences for behavior, of course, because the pagans who worship other gods do things for their gods that would break the Jewish law, that would violate the Jewish law. You see? So it's not a simple act of those gods. Okay, so I'm gonna bow to them and maybe bring a little offering to the temple. No, some of the things that people do for those other gods are grave violations of Jewish law. So, for example, human sacrifice, right? The Torah is entirely against human sacrifice, which is something that different polytheistic or pagan groups would do for their gods, right? And that's because the relationship of the pagan to the deity in paganism, in polytheism, is very, very different to the relationship that a Jew has with the Lord in monotheism. It's not simply that polytheists believe in many gods. That's not the end of it. The behavioral implications of the difference are profound, right? Because in polytheism, in paganism, the relationship between a human and the deity is manipulative. Okay, so you have a god of rain, and you go do something for the god of rain so that he will make it rain, right? You're trying to manipulate the god to get something for yourself, or you do something for the god of war so that it will go well for you when you go to war, right? You're trying to manipulate the god of war. You're trying to control them, propitiate them, right? So they're pleading this verb that we were talking about, which is the title of the Parasha of today, right? The polytheist is pleading with the deity, right? Trying to get the deity to do something. And here, the very interesting question that brings us back to costly signaling theory is why, for example, would you think that killing your firstborn child, right, or something like that, is gonna coax the deity into doing what you want, right? Well, because if you're killing your child or someone's child, right, if you're doing something as dramatically costly as that, you must really be very serious. Your intention must be very honest. This is the way to prove, right? So you prove to the god that you're willing to pay a very big price, right? And this is a model taken from human interactions. Okay, how does the father of the bride know that the potential son-in-law really means to marry his daughter? Well, he brings over a huge bride price, right? Many head of cattle or whatever, something that is costly, right? Because when it's costly, it's more likely to be honest, right? They're paying the price to emit the signal. They really want to emit this signal, right? They really mean what they say, right? So that's the model that is then copied for the relationship between the worshiper and the deity. So you have to prove to the deity that you are worthy of getting what the deity is going to give. And the only way to, in this logic, the way to demonstrate the purity and honesty of your intention is to pay a cost. You have to pay an important cost. Okay, that's the idea. But these are horrible crimes, right? Horrible crimes. These deities that the pagans worship are not ethical. They're not ethical at all. They're like they're forces of nature that you can manipulate for good or for evil, right? But the relationship between the Jew and the Lord is completely different, and it's encapsulated in this passage that we just read. If you stick to the Lord, you will live. If you don't, you will die. And sticking to the Lord means following the Lord's law. That's what it means. That's what it means, right? So in the new contractual relationship, the way to stop the Lord from killing you, that's what this passage is literally saying, right? The way to stop the Lord from killing you is to be a good person, is to keep the Lord's law, is to love your neighbor as you love yourself, because that's what the law commands, right? This is love your neighbor as you love yourself is the commandment that the most influential rabbi of all time, Rabbi Hillel the Elder, identified as the
core,
as the generative commandment for all of Judaism, right? So this is what it means to stick to the Lord. It means to love your neighbor, right? You're not gonna get behavior from the Lord by hurting anyone, which is what the polytheists are doing with their human sacrifices and other kinds of barbarities that they do for their gods, right? So this relationship is completely different. Here you must fear the Lord. This is something that the Torah repeats over and over and over again. Look, we can see it here. I'm going to share the text again. So let's just look for the word fear. Here we go. So what great nation has statutes and judgments so righteous, ethical, as this whole law which I am placing before you today? Only pay attention and watch yourselves closely so that you do not forget the things which your eyes have seen, and they do not depart from your heart all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your grandchildren, impressing these things on their mind and penetrating their heart with well, that's an interpretation. This is the translator's sort of kind of overbearing interpretation. Especially the day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, at Mount Sinai, when the Lord said to me, assemble the people to me, and I will let them hear my words, so that they may learn to fear me all the days they live on the land, and so that they may teach their children, right? So yeah, one of the things we see here is, and it keeps coming up, is that the Lord is very worried, and therefore so is Moses, that the Jewish people can't do it. They can't do it. They can't do it. They're not going to be able to stay monotheists. It's not going to work. The Torah is full of this. It's page after page after page. It begins with the golden calf incident, right? Because that is interpreted by God as the most brutal betrayal, right? He gets very, very mad. In fact, when God is conversing with Moses at the top of Mount Sinai, and the Israelites down below are getting Aaron, Moses' brother, to build a golden calf, the Lord gets so upset that he tells Moses that he's going to kill them all. He's going to kill all the Israelites. And he says to Moses, and I'll make you a new people. We'll go find some other people, and we'll try again. So they can't do it. And the text is very clear. The Lord remains upset about this episode all the way to the end of the Torah. He never recovers. And it keeps coming back. That he's hurt and he's angry by what the Israelites did. Other things anger him as well, but this is the worst. The golden calf thing, it just he can never forget it, and it makes him dangerous. So right after the golden calf incident, he doesn't kill all of the Israelites because Moses pleads with him. Moses says to him, "Look, please don't do this. Don't kill them." And he says to him, "Look, if you kill them, they're going to make fun of you in Egypt, right? What's the Pharaoh going to think that you performed all these miracles to bring your people out of slavery, and for what? To bring them into the desert to kill them? What are they going to think of you in Egypt? It's going to be embarrassing." It's kind of Moses' argument, right? And this appears to work, and God doesn't kill all of the Israelites. He kills, I can't remember how many he kills, maybe 20,000, but he's dangerous. He kills many Israelites. And when we get to the end of the Torah, he's still very upset, right? So when we hear in the text that God wants us to fear him, it is an expression of this worry, right? So he's like, how am I going to get, I mean, these people, they're not going to make it. They're not going to stay monotheists. How am I going to do it? So it's almost like he's backing into the only strategy that could possibly work, which is to terrify them, right? If you don't stay monotheists, if you don't stick to the law, I'm going to kill you. You have to fear me. You have to fear me, right? It's like a dad, an out of control dad. He can't get the child to behave, right? He can't get the child to behave. So in desperation, he becomes violent. But notice, he becomes violent and imposes himself and requires fear in order to keep the Israelites free. You see, because this is what the law does. The law keeps you free. It's the law of the liberated slaves. It produces a legal political system where there cannot be oppression. So the Lord is desperately trying to find the mechanism that will keep these people on the path of freedom. He doesn't want them to be slaves again. You see, this is what he's so desperate.
Exactly.
But it's very free and ethical, right? He wants a society where nobody oppresses anybody else, right? So it's this paradoxical behavior because he becomes violent and does horrible things to force the Israelites to stay on a path which is a good path, right? It's the path of freedom and ethics because that's what the law achieves, right? So you have this very interesting paradox. It's very interesting contradiction. And the other thing I find very interesting is that God and Moses are never convinced that this is going to work. They're never convinced that this is going to work. And so there's a passage here. Let me see if I can find it. Well, I'm not going to look for it because I'll waste everybody's time. But you can go to the passage and find it where Moses says to the Israelites, "But you're not gonna you're gonna stumble. You're gonna abandon monotheism. You're gonna worship other gods, and then all kinds of misfortune is gonna befall you, right? All kinds of bad stuff is gonna happen." But if you then return to the Lord, then you will be blessed. Oh, well, there's one passage where I do have it right here. He says, I'll read you this one. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. So he says, reinforcing, for the upteenth time, the first commandment against idolatry. He says, you shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God, visiting, that is, avenging, the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing graciousness and loving kindness to thousands of generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Now, of course, this is inconsistent, right? I mean, you can't apply the first rule and the second rule together. I mean, one of these rules is going to contradict the other necessarily. Visiting, punishing up to the third and fourth generation, but blessing up to the 1,000th generation of those who.
No, but what you can say here is that one good act can abolish 1,000 of bad.
Well, you can say that, right? But my point is, it's going to create contradictions at some point. But that's not really the point. The point is that he establishes a relationship where bad stuff will happen if you behave badly, and good stuff will happen if you are good, right? So the only way to manipulate this God, if you will, is by being a good person. This is what he's saying. You want things to be okay? Well, then be a good person. Stick to the law. Stick to the law. Don't go after other gods. Stick to this one and to the law that makes you good, makes you ethical, and things will go well. This is, but the Lord and Moses are never convinced. They are never convinced. And the very last things that Moses says to the Israelites, the very, very last thing he says at the end of Deuteronomy, is very bitter. He's very bitter, and he predicts that the Israelites will abandon the Lord and will abandon the law and will become polytheists, and it's not going to work. That's what this whole thing is rotten. It's not going to work, and that's how the book ends. That's how the book ends. And then if you follow the Hebrew Bible, and I'm going to get to the big point I want to make because I know we're almost out of time. But if you follow the Hebrew Bible in the books that continue the story after the Torah, right? So we have Joshua, Samuel, etc., and then we have the books of Kings and the books of Chronicles and so forth. And you have that whole story. The story has a very interesting structure that seems to confirm the fears of the Lord and of Moses that the experiment is not going to work, right? Because what you see in that story is the Israelites over and over again stumbling and abandoning the Lord and going back to polytheism. They do it over and over and over again. So the constant theme, the idée fixe, the returning theme in all of these stories is that the prophet of each generation is the only monotheist. Nobody listens to the prophet, even the king. They're all going up to the high places to build altars to foreign gods and making idols, and this happens every generation. And the prophets are all very upset that nobody in the land of Israel is a monotheist except for the prophet, right? This is what keeps getting told, right? So until you get to the exile, right? And then when the leaders of the Jewish people, Ezra and Nehemiah, bring the exiles back to Jerusalem and sort of restart the Jewish community, or well, I mean, the books claim this is a reignition of the movement, right? But in the historical evidence, what you see is a very interesting scene in Jerusalem with Ezra and Nehemiah, because they have all of the people of Israel gather together to commit themselves to follow the Torah. It's very similar to what happens with the big column of smoke after they cross the Red Sea. So they all assemble. Scribes go through the multitude explaining the Torah to the people, and then the people all together commit themselves to follow the Torah, right? But before this event, the story that you read is one of just failure. They can't do it. They're polytheists. They can't follow the Torah. It's a very interesting story. And I will have much more to say about this, but I wanted to lay out the structure because it's a fascinating structure. And I think, and with this I will end, I think at root in this structure, what this narrative is telling us is that polytheism really is very difficult. Forgive me, monotheism is very difficult. Monotheism is very difficult. Why? Because fundamentally, monotheism is an ethical system. that presumes God is good. Okay? This is what you're presuming. You're presuming that God is good and that he wants us to be good, and that his intervention in the world is to make us good. Okay? That's what the monotheist believes. And yet, in this universe of ours, very, very bad things are always happening to good people. And very, very bad people are always getting away with horrible crimes, right? So this is a challenge to the monotheistic worldview, right? Because you say to yourself, well, if God is good, why are all these babies suffering? Why are all these innocent people getting murdered? Why are all these sick people suffering for no good reason? They didn't do anything to anyone. They were just born sick. Why is that happening? Why are all these oppressors murdering and enslaving all these innocent people over here and so forth? These things are always happening, right? Why World War II? Why the Shoah? Why all of these things, right? So the monotheist is challenged in his belief that God is good when all of these bad things happen to good people, and all of these bad people get away with horrible crimes, right? And this is called the problem of theodicy. How to reconcile the idea of a good God with an evil world. The polytheist doesn't have this problem. The problem of theodicy does not exist in polytheism, or at least in some forms of polytheism, because the gods of these polytheistic religions are arbitrarily violent. They're not ethical. They're not asking us to be good. They don't care about that. They're just forces of nature that people can manipulate and that can be used for good or for evil, right? So it all depends on what the human who is manipulating the god wants to get done. But they're not fundamentally good. And so because they are arbitrarily evil and sometimes do horrible things and have, horrible personalities and so forth, the fact that horrible things happen to good people in the world makes perfect sense. The gods are cruel. They don't care about us. They are arbitrarily evil. They have temper tantrums and have horrible ambitions, just like humans, right? So then the fact that we are suffering and horrible things happens to us in the polytheistic system doesn't present a special contradiction.
Yes, and
by contrast, monotheism plunges us into the problem of theodicy. So I think this is the reason that monotheism is so difficult. It's that to stay a monotheist, you must somehow reconcile.
We have a response for that topic.
You must somehow reconcile that you have a good God, and yet you have an evil universe, right? And this difficulty is what makes it. I'm speculating, but I'm thinking this difficulty is what makes it so that there is a constant return to polytheism. And this is what the Lord and Moses are so worried about, that there's going to be slippage, that no matter how many times they repeat it, no matter how dramatic the delivery, no matter the threats of violence, right, for straying from the Lord, no matter what they do, the Lord and Moses are convinced, or at least they're very, very worried that it's not going to work. And I think that's a very interesting structure to keep in your heads. And I think it's one that explains a lot of what is written in the Torah, and also a lot of what has happened in history.
The response we have about that topic in Judaism is that there is freedom of choice. So we can choose to do evil or we can choose to do good. And if you have a repercussion for that act, if you do good and you have a good result, you gain good health, money, and whatever, like you have a good result of because of your good.
Yes, but we know this is not true.
Exactly. So we lose the purpose of electing doing good just for the sake of doing good, not because of the reward afterwards. And we say no to doing bad, not because of the punishment, but because of just caring about the other person.
No, I get that. Of course, we in the Judeo-Christian tradition, we choose to be good based on faith. It's a leap of faith. We know that we may not be rewarded for being good. True. This is true. We are good because we make the leap of faith that we must be good, period. Because we accept the law that the Lord gave us. That's it. There's no rationale. It's a leap of faith. I agree with you. But my point is that precisely because people will not necessarily be rewarded for being good, in fact, they may be punished for being good, and often are, right? Precisely because of that, monotheism is a difficult theology. Because when people who are good are punished and people who are evil are rewarded, and we see that happening every day, when we see that, it tends to make some people doubt, understandably.
Yes.
This is completely understandable. And that's why monotheism is so difficult to stabilize. True monotheism. It's very difficult to stabilize because it doesn't seem to agree with the universe.
Yes. Okay.
Right? And that's why I think that the Lord and Moses are both so worried that it's going to be very difficult to stick with this. And they, in fact, predict that the Israelites won't be able to do it. And look, history shows that staying monotheistic has been very difficult. Very, very difficult. So I will I am a monotheist, but I recognize that this is difficult. And I will examine in other podcasts how both Jews and Christians over history have actually allowed paganism to, what would be the word, to pollute their faiths. Okay, I can't get into it right now because these are giant topics, but I think that the prediction that the Lord and Moses made, that polytheism would turn out to be very tempting, and that the Israelites would keep slipping back into polytheism, I think that was a reasonable prediction for this reason that I'm giving you. A very reasonable prediction. Now, the other reason that it's the same reason. So people can see that they can get all kinds of material benefits being evil. They can see it. It happens every day.
Yes.
It happens every day that people who oppress their fellow humans gain material rewards by doing so. And that is a very strong temptation, right? So staying monotheistic, therefore ethical, sticking with being good, even when you might be punished for being good, which means you are being good on faith. That's tough. It's tough. It's tough. We that's why we need the Jewish people. You see, that's why the world needs the Jewish people, because in every generation there is a core of Jews who does stay faithful to the Lord. This is discussed in the Hebrew Bible as the remnant. There will always be a remnant, no matter what happens, that always stays faithful to the Lord, that keeps the laws, transfers the Torah from one generation to the next, right? And always loves and fears the Lord. There's always a remnant. That's the light unto the nations. That's the torch that is being passed on from one generation to the next. we need the Jews. We need them. We need this remnant that, despite the difficulty of monotheism, sticks to the program, and therefore makes it possible for every new generation to learn the law that sets us free. And the performance of the Jewish people in the West, as I've said many times, since they came in contact with the ancient Greco-Romans, demonstrates what the faithful Jews, what the effect that the faithful Jews have on the world. Because over the centuries, the societies of the West, which in the ancient world were Greco-Roman societies, right? They were the worst societies on earth. They were infinitely cruel. And over the centuries, these worst societies on earth became the best societies on earth. Why? Because in every generation, at least a small group of Jews was faithful to the Lord and kept passing down the Torah. And by passing down the Torah, preserved the opportunity for us to fight for freedom. And that, starting in the Middle Ages, the Christians started the Bible, and they started fighting for freedom. And finally, in the last few centuries, Western civilization became democratic thanks to this. Okay, so now we've done everything we promised. We've talked about the Semitism versus anti-Semitism model. We talked about the Parasha, and we connected all of that to modern politics. So to close, the great crisis of the West in our generation, of course, requires us to close ranks with the Jewish people and reconnect with the tradition of Semitism. Right? There are different ways to do that. You don't have to convert to Judaism, but you don't even have to believe in God. But in my view, the West will not survive unless we reconnect with this historical, transcendent, millenarian movement of Semitism. This is 4,300 years old, fighting for freedom, fighting for justice, fighting against oppression, fighting for human compassion. If we don't reconnect with that great tradition, we will not survive, not as free societies. So let us stop there. Oh yeah, you have a question?
Before we close, I would like to add something. When you show us the passage that says that you must fear me, I am God, something like that, and you will teach to your kids the fear and the love for God.
Yeah,
I'm almost sure that that is one of the passages of the Shema Israel. It's one of the most important prayers.
Yes, it's very important to fear the Lord. Yep.
Yeah, and in that passage, it says not only that you must fear me and you must not go away from me and pray to other gods, but also to love me and to teach your next generations.
Yes, but look, in the Judeo-Christian West, because it is dominantly Christian, people are always talking about loving the Lord. But it is very important to fear the Lord.
Yes. Very
important, because fear of the Lord is what keeps you honest. It keeps you on the straight and narrow. Yes. And the Torah insists on that for a reason. It doesn't mean that you can't love the Lord. Of course, love the Lord. Nobody's saying you shouldn't love the Lord, but you must also fear the Lord, because
yes,
if you don't fear the Lord, monotheism is just going to be too difficult. You need all of the emotions in there.
That's why I believe God tells, and Moshe tells the entire Am Israel, entire population,
the nation of Israel.
That you must fear him in order to have many mechanisms to be on the track. love him,
exactly,
fear him,
yes.
like, because if you don't, the Bnei Israel were on the desert trying to go back to Egypt to be slaves.
Exactly. So
yeah, like yeah.
They will go back to being slaves. And this is, remember, we were talking about this earlier. This is the structure. This is the recurring structure. So why doesn't Moses enter because this is today's parasha. Moses can't, the Lord says you can't go in, right? Why can't you go in? Because he's very upset about those 2 episodes when the people of Israel said, well, we might as well go back to Egypt because we're going to die of thirst here. No. You have to have the courage to fight for freedom. And if things get difficult, you have to keep going. The Lord will not tolerate that the Israelites choose slavery over freedom. He will not tolerate that, because the mission of the people of Israel is to free the entire world, to be a light unto the nations. So if they give up, the entire world is lost. You see? So the Lord is very upset that in these 2 episodes, they were wanting to, return to Egypt, or thinking about it, or complaining that they were taken out of Egypt, which is, of course, the thing that makes the Lord most proud, that he brought them out of Egypt, out of bondage, into freedom. This is his entire project, is freedom, right? Human freedom is his entire project. So it's very, very offended when the Jews choose some form of slavery, right? So you have to understand this metaphorically, because this is what idolatry is. Idolatry is some form of mental slavery. You construct some authority, and then you worship that authority. That's idolatry. And the minute you do that, you're a slave again. No. The only authority is the law that obligates you to be free. That's the paradox of Judaism. You submit to the law that makes you free. Okay? That's the only thing you can submit to. You can only submit to the Lord because the Lord makes you free. Okay? No other authority is legitimate. Only the Lord. Because if another authority, if you start worshiping any other authority, you're back to slavery. You see? If you go worship the little idol, the little wooden idol of the whatever, or the golden idol or whatever, well, obviously that idol is controlled by a priest and by an institution who claim to speak for the God. So the minute you go worship that idol, you are back to being the slave of some institution that claims to have authority. That's why it's the first commandment. It's very, very important. It's the entire basis of human freedom, that you should have no other gods, because this God is going to make you free. You see? But it's difficult to stay bravely on this path. It is difficult. So it makes perfect sense that the text, remember, we were talking about repetition. This is constantly repeated in the Torah. Constantly, the admonition that they should not worship foreign gods, and the admonition that, and the prediction, forgive me, that despite all the repetition, they're going to do it anyway, right? This is repeated over and over and over again in the Torah, which means the Torah wants for us to take this very, very seriously, okay? Because once again, paper was very expensive, and repetition was a way of screaming. Okay, so we have to take these things into account when we're interpreting the Torah. Anyway, I think we've done enough here. We will be coming back to these themes because they're everywhere in the Torah, and we will connect them to other themes in our next podcasts. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. We'll see you here next Wednesday, the same time, and forevermore, as long as we can do this. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, and please let us know what you think about these videos, if you like these topics, what you want to listen more, about the Bible and whatever you want to listen from Francisco, we will have this feedback reading.
And which rabbis, priests, or ministers you want us to interview?
Also,
so you can also propose that.
Yeah,
that'll be very fun.
That'll be amazing. So yeah, thank you so much.
Or scholars, or Bible scholars, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, so we can reach a lot more people. Thank you so much.
Go with God. I'll see you next week.